Okay, so just a few reminders and updates. In February, we did have an update to, oop, where'd you go? Uh-oh. There we go. Not working, my friend. I'm having problems over here.
Oh, I think you're muted, Danielle.
I apologize. I lost my slides and then my coworker said they could still see them, but I couldn't see them. So I apologize for the
No worries.
issues I'm having today. I haven't hosted a meeting in Zoom in quite some time, so bear with me. Okay, so in February, there were some updates to cataloging policies and procedures. That includes just reminders to keep the 035 and 050 fields when editing records, because some libraries use those. Obviously, we have the OCLC number. And then some also use the information in the 050 to help with cataloging and call numbers. Also, empty bibliographic records are automatically deleted now after 45 days. And you don't have to delete them. They will auto delete. However, we have had some issues where records from other libraries that were kind of waiting for item records were being deleted. And so just try to only do that with your own records. Like if you make a mistake upon import or you want to change something, you can go ahead and delete. You can go ahead and delete those records, but try to leave, if you can see that it's another person that imported it or created it, try to just let it wait for that 45 days, because I know we have some libraries that are kind of low on staff right now, and it's taking them a little longer than normal to get their item records on when we send them to them. And then also just a reminder to take care when merging and overlaying. We have noticed, I don't know if anybody else has had this issue where newer editions of regular print and large print have been merged together, and it causes the holds to consolidate, and then it's kind of hard to tease those apart when you go to separate them. And I think that sometimes with brief records, they're so brief, there's not a lot there. But I would say that if you have a new title and it's got a different ISBN than the record you're looking at, it's most likely because it's a different format. You know, it's not like something that's been out for 20 years that has been, re-released over and over again and is going to have multiple ISBNs. So in that case, if you're not sure, you can leave it be. And then, most likely if it's not needed, someone will, delete it at some point. But we have had a couple of those. And I know sometimes with brief records, the icons don't always come over as well. So that could be tricky. So always make sure you're looking for that ISBN to kind of guide your way when merging, especially with newer things like that. I'm still having technical issues. I apologize. I'm unable to do it. I do not get that.
So I'll just chat well to give Danielle some space so she doesn't feel like she's under a microscope. One thing I was thinking about with those brief records, and I'm sure this is something that many people know, but those icons on the record, the little book icon versus the large print book icon versus the audio book versus the preloaded audio or e-audiobook, those all come from control fields. So they're all coming from either the 006, 007, or 008. And so what will happen with those publisher records is those records, those lines are unpopulated at all. And so then Evergreen doesn't know what kind of an item is, or it just thinks that everything is a book if it's got some data in the 008 but not everything. So that's one thing to kind of watch out for in vendor records or brief records is is it giving you the amount of information that your patrons are going to need in order to properly place holds on it, right? Because if it's not showing up as that icon for a large print book, I don't think most patrons are gonna, scroll down to the publisher info and be like, oh, well, that's Cengage, that's got to be large print. So it is a good thing to either spot check or just keep an eye on. And Elizabeth, of course, has put the guide that it kind of breaks it down in the chat. But that's just Katie's hot tips on brief records. Okay.
Okay, I think I have control of my screen again. For some reason, I could not manipulate my slides. This is a nightmare. So I'm very sorry. Okay, let's see now. Come on, you can do it. Okay. So this issue with the 490, the 800, and the 830 also came up during, I think, one of our last meetings, and I can't remember who, but they were finding 800s and 830 fields in the same records, and they were like, is that a little redundant? It is. However, I kind of sent me into a rabbit hole of basically kind of researching this because the Library of Congress actually has ceased tracing series, meaning that they're not issuing authorities anymore for series. So the 490, obviously, we have the book in hand. Generally speaking, it's going to be consistent among series. The 490 will match what we would usually have in that 800 field. However, in the off chance that it doesn't match or there's variations on the series title, that would mean that now we are kind of the ones who are kind of creating and enforcing those authorities and ensuring that these 800s are consistent. So I kind of went into this thing like, okay, well, I'm not the authority and I'm creating authority. So is it wrong for me to be populating these 800 fields with things that technically are not official? So I actually wrote the Library of Congress and I got an answer back. And they basically said it really depends on the indexing that you're using in your ILS. So long story short, we 800 and an 830 is a little bit of overkill. However, but keeping and consistent 800s and 830s, like basically now it's kind of up to us if it's not an older title that would still have that information in Library of Congress. So you won't run into this very often, but you will see it occasionally. And so I think it's just whenever you get a book in a series in, and if it looks just like a variation or something a little wonky, just make sure that that 800 is still consistent with the majority of the series that you're looking at. And that's basically all there really is to that. But I kind of was like, had a little crisis, like I'm not the Library of Congress and I'm making things up for these fields that don't exist. So they assured me we could continue to make things up as long as they make sense and they're consistent. And that will allow us to better find all of our materials. And also, we have wonky. Yeah. Also, for older records, in the 042 field, you might find a code PCC. That means that that record has been evaluated. Like you might bring it in, say, if you have like an OCLC subscription or something, but it basically means that that record has gone through checks and balances to make sure that all the authorities in it are proper and correct. So that series information in those records should be pretty nice. You shouldn't have to edit it or do anything special, really. Any comments or questions or anything on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So the 800 and 830, honestly, I've never even done anything with those and didn't even know anything about them. I only ever put the series information in the 490.
Okay.
So do you have to put it in both, or?
It would probably be helpful. I do know that the 490 is basically you're transcribing it directly from the book. So if there's a variation in the series, an 800 might be really useful because it will help link all those titles together in one kind of uniform.
Are you supposed to enter it in both 800, 830, and 830, or are they for different things?
Just one or the other. You will sometimes see the 800 with the author's name and then the series title, and the 830 would just be the series title. But I can send you more information on that if you want. It's just really, there was like questions about whether it was a little bit too much to have all that stuff going on in a record. But also we all get different quality records depending on our subscriptions and the vendors that we use and everything else. So you know, it really depends kind of what you're seeing. You know, a brief record, a brief vendor record is not going to have great information in it. So if you're a library that brings in order records or brief records, you know, once that book is close to release or at the release time, there should be a better record available, whether it's through your vendor, through OCLC.
So when you enter the format, is the format for how you enter it in the 830 the same as the 490?
It's pretty much the same. Yes. Let me see. You have, if you're tracing series, so you would have 490 and then 1 in your blank, right? And then you enter your series information. And then
sorry, I had to step away to get my notes. Would you say that one more time?
Sure. Well, would you like me to send? I can always send it to you too if you give me your email address.
Danielle,
I could send it to you. Yes.
do you want to send it to the whole list and then I can add it to the help pages? So if anybody else has questions, we could always refer to that documentation.
Go.
Okay. Yeah, I have the title of the series as it appears on the item, semicolon, B, the volume number.
It's similar in the 830,
Okay.
but you'll have your indicators would be, I'm looking here, your 8XX.
Okay, so it's similar, but you guys will send something with the
Yeah.
details.
A trace
Thank
series,
you.
basically, yeah, it's traced and untraced. So if you have an 800, there's going to be an indicator, a different indicators in that field than there would be if you didn't have one. So that indicates that it's traced in the 800 field. So I'll send something out to the listserv about that and make sure that it's really clear.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so our committee member, Jacob Ingalls, has been developing a non-English resources cataloging guide, and I did send out that draft with the agenda. I didn't know, did you want to say anything about the guide, Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a little bit of why it came to be, because when you're handling non-Latin scripts, the official MARC documentation will tell you that you need to put a romanization in the 245 and then put the non-Latin script in an 880 alternative graphic representation. And we discovered that Spark doesn't seem to index the 880 field. And so we noticed that Lower Makunji was already putting Chinese script in the 245, and it doesn't seem to cause Spark to have a crisis. So the guide is just kind of my notes as I worked through both trying to figure out how to catalog some like French and German things that we got, and learning about some fields that are a little less common. And I just wanted some feedback to make sure that it's meeting the standards that we have together as a consortium. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Does anybody have any questions? I did take a look at it. It looks pretty good, in my opinion. I don't know if anybody else had time to take a look at it or offer any feedback, but I think it'll be really useful for us. Does anybody else have any questions for Jacob or myself or about the guide?
I
Where
just
is
want to
this
share.
guide? Where is it located? Sorry.
It was in the agenda. There's a link to it.
Oh, I missed
But-
that. Sorry.
There's a link in the chat as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
You guys are on it.
And once you're satisfied and you all agree, we can put it in the official documentation as well. So I just didn't put it on there yet because if you were editing it,
Makes sense.
it would be a lot of back and forth unnecessarily.
Anything else from anyone? And I have to apologize. I can't see the chat because I actually can see my slides and manipulate them. So that's kind of, that's my sweet spot right now. So I apologize.
Oh, so it's still a draft or is it definite now?
It's still a draft. So if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the document for Jacob.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. Had some concern from a committee member that about the preservation of the 758 field in records, and I think myself included, we have become accustomed to kind of taking links out of records because generally it's going to e-resource or something that we don't really want in our records. However, the 758 field is kind of being populated with different URLs that would lead you to other information about this resource. And in the future, this is going to be more and more important. And so while MARC isn't going anywhere right now, this is just the very beginnings of how OCLC and other organizations are beginning to link together data. And so we had concerns that these were being stripped out of the records because we're so accustomed, I think a lot of us anyway, are accustomed to taking links out and things that don't apply in the MARC record. But I think that it's probably best to keep these in the record because it's kind of, we're kind of moving towards that, towards the future. And some of the benefits are that it would help library staff identify other resources. And it would also make your specific library holdings easier to find in general online searches. So does does preserving these fields or give anybody any heartache, or does anybody have a different way that they've been approaching them? And I did also include in the agenda, there's also a link to an OCLC article that just kind of explains briefly linked data and kind of what kind of work they're doing. If anybody wants more information on that. Is anybody opposed to kind of moving to maintain this information for any reason, or does anybody have any comments or questions on it?
Does the 758 field appear to patrons when they look in the OPAC?
Does it appear in the OPAC, like in the display?
Yeah, when a patron goes to one of our catalogs and looks up a record, would the 758 field show?
No, it doesn't show in the OPAC, as far as I've seen it anyway. I don't
I
see
mean,
it all the time.
You can always scroll down and view the full mark record, so technically yes.
Well,
But
you know,
it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's one of those, like, not trying to oversimplify it, but it shouldn't be mapped to any of the more details kind of stuff, and it wouldn't put it in. It wouldn't be like an 856 where it would give you that link. I don't think.
Yeah.
I haven't tested it.
And like I said, I don't see it in a lot of records, but I've been seeing it a little bit more. And Kim, who also is one of our catalogers here, has also been seeing it a bit more. So it's just something to look out for. I mean, if you accidentally remove it, nothing catastrophic is going to happen. But it's just kind of maintaining the database and our information, kind of looking towards the future.
And I will say I did find a few incorrect ones with Manga where it says has work and it listed a different volume number. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. Manga's always causing trouble.
Yes, and that's where I'm seeing the 758 field more than anywhere when I'm doing the cataloging is in the Manga. So I've just been letting it in, and some things that are movie based. Also, I'm seeing that it's trying to link out to that. So I've just been letting everything there.
I have a question related to manga.
Uh-oh.
It doesn't have to do with 758. I never even did anything with that field. Sorry, I was only trained on like the basic fields, so I don't know that one. But it did remind me about something else that I've seen with the manga records, where sometimes people catalog all the volumes on one record, and it's really annoying because you can't find the single volume that you're looking for because they're all rolled into one. Is there any kind of guidelines on that, or is that okay for people to keep doing that? I just think it makes it more difficult when people do that.
Well, actually, funny you should mention that, because the next topic is serial records, and that's probably what you're coming across. So
Yeah.
there's a difference between a serial record, which is basically built to hold all the volumes, as opposed to a freestanding or individual record, which would hold a volume. And so that is actually our next topic. So
before we move on, do we want to add the info about keeping the 758 field to your policies and procedures, or would you like to wait and have like a formal vote?
I'm personally okay with it, but I want to make sure that nobody else has any concerns about it or anything else. So that's fine with me. I think that it's probably a good policy, as long as everybody else is okay with that. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. I'll add it, and then if you folks, well, maybe send it out in the minutes, and then we'll get a definitive answer from those who are unable to attend, and then we can add it.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay, so Gina brought up an issue, which I think that she's probably seeing serial records. So at YCL, we've had some issues with serials. Generally speaking, they basically have to be pulled in from a paid subscription source. You might be able to find them from other organizations that we have access to in Z39.50. I would assume, like, say, a major resource, you know, or a major university library or public library was probably going to have a serial for Consumer Reports, you know, or something like that, that you could pull in if you don't have access to those records and from a subscription like OCLC. However, so these records stand independently in the catalog, and they have a distinct icon. So they should kind of stand out from your individual book records. And it is basically, the title is going to be Bleach, you know, and you're not going to see like volume information in the title. And one of the ways we keep track of the holdings on a serial record is we add all of the ISBNs for all of the volumes in that record. And then we suppress that ISBN so that it can't cause unintentional merges or overlays. So that way we know what's on the record, but we're not interfering with people importing freestanding records. So a lot of organizations might use serials, but they might only use them for magazines. YCL uses them for graphic novels, a lot of the NOLO guides, almanac, like the World Almanac, travel books, things that come out in editions, basically. And so if your organization doesn't use those, that's okay. But in that case, you shouldn't be attaching a freestanding volume to that record. You should be probably bringing in a unique MARC record for your volume 79 or whatever it is. And that would be freestanding at your organization. You would be able to see it. So, and there's been issues with these, and I don't think we haven't really talked about it. And I think our training tells us to share bibs. So that's our instinct, you know, to share bibliographic records. It makes sense. But at YCL and other libraries, we will add what's called a monograph part, which displays the volume or edition information. And that allows the patron to place a hold on an individual part or issue on that serial record. The problem with this is that when another organization comes to that serial record and also places monograph parts on it, everyone in the consortium can see those parts, including, I can't remember. I know the staff can definitely see them. And I'm thinking that members can also place holds at other libraries on parts that your library might not actually own.
It will prevent them from placing the hold in general because their copy doesn't have a part, but it lists all of the parts on the record. So that's where the disconnect is. It says pick a part, and then they pick a part, and then it's like, well, the copy that is eligible to them is not one that has parts. So there's like a clash, and then nothing happens.
I think some people were putting in the call number, like the volume number, like you would do with the date for the magazine. But a lot of people weren't, and they all have the same call number, and you can't tell what volume the manga was.
Yeah, I think.
So
go ahead.
So one of the things that I think would work for Gina's situation is when you do the search, if you limit your search to just books, so that you're not seeing the search results for anything that is a record type of serials and magazines. That will help some, Because if you have a library like York or like Berks, where they are using serial records for something that most of our libraries don't use it for, like I think Danielle, you guys use it for like Magic Treehouse, which most of our libraries have those cataloged as individual items. So then but that should be a different record type. So if you don't want, the serials records, you should be able to limit the search, like maybe do a keyword search for ISBN and do it only on books instead of doing the full ISBN search, because that's gonna give you all of those.
Are you talking about like when you search for cataloging?
Yeah, so when you or when you're searching for patrons, so like probably when you're searching for items for patrons, you're only searching your library, so you're only going to get what you have holdings on anyway. But when the item comes to you and you're cataloging it, you don't want to have to sift through the ones that have all the different holdings
Well,
attached.
I don't really have a problem with the cataloging, because if I can't find a single record for it in Spark, then I just search Z39.50 until
Sure,
I
yeah.
find one that was a single record, not a serial record.
Perfect. Good.
So I don't really have that problem with the actual cataloging. It's more like a previous cataloger at our library, for example, cataloged a bunch of the Narutos on a serial record, and I couldn't help a patron find the volume they wanted the other day because
okay.
of that.
Because
That's
they
what
were
I'm
all
just-
on the one record, and your local call numbers weren't distinguishing between the.
Yeah, so that's why I was just wondering if Spark had any kind of guidance on that. So hopefully it won't keep happening with the mangas to make it
So-
more difficult for people.
We do have guidance on like when you should use serials and when you shouldn't, and I feel like that's probably what Elizabeth just linked.
It
However,
sounds like you.
call
Mm.
numbers are always going to be completely local.
Uh-huh.
So if
Yeah.
you you could look at what other libraries do as for best practices in terms of call numbers, but we don't have call number policies because it only affects your location. So if you want all your Narutos to be NAR and not
Yeah, I
FF,
wasn't.
then like
Mhm.
that's up to you.
No, I wasn't talking about call numbers. It sounded like a second ago you were just saying that only the magazine should be cataloged on serial. Did I misunderstand?
It's up to libraries. It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so and it is explained out in the policy that the cataloging committee had written previously. And there are situations where we don't want people to use monograph parts, and I think somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is it just for the DVDs? Is this so if you have it like a DVD set and you want to break it up, we say use separate records for that instead of putting it in monograph parts. But for anything else, it's up to the libraries about how they want their patrons to interact with the materials in the catalog and what they feel like is more discoverable. So if you want, like York uses them for Magic Treehouse, it works for them, it's fine. The libraries that I have worked at have not used them for anything, and so they have every copy of Bleach on a separate record, which is like also not that great. Like it's an ongoing like cataloger joke that like if you want to make a bunch of catalogers mad, just talk about manga.
Okay.
Because everybody does it differently. That's why when you were like, I have a question about manga, we were all like,
oh, okay. All right.
It's a whole thing. And
well,
I'm
on team second. I'm on team separate record, but okay. I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
It's a good thing to bring up because we can always talk about it, and but we'll have a like a fundraiser or something that's team serials versus team separate record, and we can see. All right, anyway, sorry Danielle to interrupt your flow there.
I appreciate your help. So yeah, I think like we have an organizational policy, so like
at York.
Yes. So, and I think that does help because then we know how we're going to approach our graphic novels, our manga, you know, our travel guides. And so it just doesn't happen where we have someone that's putting on that volume 80 on its own and then using a serial. We know everybody has to do that at York. We also have centralized cataloging, so that makes it a little bit easier to monitor that. So you don't have to use them for anything. I do think that a lot of libraries, if they do use them, maybe magazines would be the thing that you'd be most familiar with, you know, that you might keep those on a serial. But I would say that, at least for us, it really works well to kind of have a policy and kind of stick with it. And that way, at least, you know, at least where to find things. And then you can also, you know, train the people that are, you know, at the front desk where to find things, because that's really difficult for them too. If they're, some are on a serial, some are freestanding, that's really confusing for them, you know, so I understand that. So that's just how we handle it here, but everybody's different. So, okay. Serial records, more serial records. Okay, so as I explained, the monograph parts, I guess if organizations want to use serials going forward, everybody has to basically have their own serial. So YCL would have its own serial for our graphic series, our NOLO books, our magazines, and other organizations would have to bring in their own serial and maintain that because we cannot have monograph parts for different organizations in the consortium on the same record. Which is, again, it's going against everything we've been taught because we are used to sharing bibs. That's kind of our whole thing. And so we've kind of come up with a little way to kind of show the ownership. So when you're cataloging, you can kind of say, oh, I want to avoid this record. Another organization this is their record. And there's nothing wrong if you like using standalone records or if you want to use serials. It's just a matter of preference and whatever your organization tends to do. So here is a screenshot of a serial record for Elizabeth's favorite title, I Am a Cat Barista. So
It's so cute. How could you not love it?
It's adorable. So you see we have the record summary, it's serials and magazines. You won't see that book icon there. And to kind of start kind of isolating these serial records by organization, in the 082 field, we have added a note that says YCLS holdings with parts only, see record notes. And then there's also a record note that says, please import a new record or find another record for a freestanding title or whatever it is that you use in your specific organization. And I do believe that there is development coming down the line where we would also have a little record note indicator that is highlighted, so it will be even easier to see that when you're working in the catalog. But that will probably happen before year's end.
I have an example of what it'll look like.
Okay.
Let me find where I uploaded it. Where did it go? Sorry. It's very exciting. Here is the link in the chat.
Nice. Thank you.
So it'll have like the little indicator on the record notes. So to the right of the end of records. Notes on the record notes tab, it'll say like parenthesis and then the number of notes on it.
And this is just to help with try to add kind of more bells and whistles so that it's easier to spot these when you're cataloging, because there have been instances, I think, where recently, like we've had merging or overlaying of our serial records with an independent volume. And then what happens is that we have to bring in another serial and then move our holdings over to that serial. And it can be very time consuming, especially when you have something with a lot of parts. And so, and I think too, it's because the ISBNs are suppressed in the serial records, it's not as easy to just kind of, for them to meet when, when you're not looking at what's in front of you. Like if you're doing, say, acquisitions and importing order records or importing anything else, it shouldn't interfere with that because those ISBNs are suppressed in the record. So I guess the point is that we just need to make sure that our catalogers in the consortium are aware of serial records and understand that they're intentional, that you are going to see these multiple ISBNs in them. And if you want to use serials with monographs, you need to have your own independent record for your organization. And I think too that we're still kind of, I think PALS too is still kind of figuring out how to, I guess, document this and then also kind of train for it. If this is kind of new information, all of you, and I know it's a lot to put forward, but trying to think if there's anything else kind of to say about it.
There is a question in the chat. Nicole is asking if we are using a serial for our magazines without parts with other libraries' holdings, should we move ours to a new record?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big undertaking. But I think generally speaking, I think the problem is that if anybody else comes along and uses parts on that record, then it's, I don't know, what do you guys think, Elizabeth and Katie? I feel like
the real issue for like the holds component is if you're using parts or not. That's the big sticky wicket, if you will. Like that's where the big issue comes in. For consistency, I think it makes sense that if you're going to use a serial record, that it just remain independent for that library, just for consistency. So you don't have to think, well, is this a parts one or is this not a parts one? I think having it, the key to success is consistency in this instance, as I say, like literally every day. So we could just make a blanket. If you're using serial records, try and be consistent. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about manga again, bringing it back to manga. There are a ton of libraries that are not using serialized records that but have multiple volumes on each in the record. And so when we're cataloging, what we've been doing is splitting ours into individual volumes now, because we used to do that. And it gets tough sorting through all that. Is there a way of consolidating some of that? Or fixing that, or so that it's not like each individual item when we're trying to find the record that exists for it, we're not going through pages and pages of where it's the entire series records that are listed as books but not serialized.
Have you tried using group formats and editions? That'd be my first suggestion.
Or I'm not sure what you're referring to with that.
Oh, so when you search either in the staff catalog or the public catalog, there is a little checkbox that says group formats and editions. And it should concatenate all the series ones together. Depends a little bit on how you have them cataloged, like how the 245s are. But that's why I said, have you tried it? Not, it'll definitely work. But you could try searching that way and seeing if that concatenates them successfully. If it doesn't, we could then look at editing those records so that it would. And we would have some other like bulk options if you did, want to, like, if you wanted to try to condense them back into individual records or split them out. We would have some options for doing that in Bash, but it'd be pretty individualized. I will say that current user group chair Heather Linsgold, her graduate school practicum was reorganizing the manga at Altoona and making it all consistent. So it is not a small undertaking in many cases to because it is common, as Gina was saying, for different catalogers to do it different ways, and then 5 years later you've got 3 different ways that people have been doing it. And like when it comes to call numbers, and especially like if it's what's on the spine label, then you have to physically sort it out. So it can definitely be a chore if you haven't been consistent in the past.
Right now, we're just trying to get the individual items into separate records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Thank you for that, Katie. Yeah, it's just everything about serials and everything about, graphic novels and manga is difficult. And I'm speaking for Kim because she deals with most of it. So, but yeah, so we're right across the hallway from each other. So.
Well, let me just throw my 2 cents in here real quick. So 10 years ago, when we came on to Spark, we went to Equinox to go ahead and have our serial records be serial records, because we had serial records in our previous ILS and we're told that we couldn't do that with Spark. So I, with the help of another lady and Danielle, had to break all of our serials back into independent records for each issue or volume. Then when we came on to Spark, we kind of ruffled feathers with our members because they were used to being able to go to Naruto and find volume 97 and say, okay, I want to put a hold on that, instead of going through page after page after page of Naruto on the pack. So we went to Equinox and asked them if there was something that we could do, that this is what we want. And we were given permission to do our serial records again, with the foresight that we had to use their verbiage as to volume and book and part, and that going forward, those records would not be shared with any other library system on Spark. Meaning that if another library came on and they had serial records, they had to have their own serial record for that title. We did not share them. And somewhere through all of the changes of staffing, that kind of fell through the loop a little bit. So we're getting back to where we were. And so we're moving forward in the right direction. And no, I don't want individual records, because I don't want to have to page through 20 pages of One Piece, who has 105 volumes right now.
The unsung hero of our department, Kim.
I will just say it is, this is like a very specific library workflow. So we pride ourselves at Spark in allowing folks to, serve their patrons in the best way possible. And since there is an existing workflow and patrons are already used to it, it is something that we would like to continue because, you know, in the end, it is all about the patrons and being able to find the item that they want. So if anyone has serial records or are working on their records and want to have those notes in the 082s and have batch record notes added to their serial bibs, let us know in support. We are happy to help you with that in batch. We're not going to make you do that laborious work all individually on your own. So just let us know and we can work on that with you.
One of the things that Danielle had mentioned is suppressing the ISBNs so to avoid unintentional merges for those records. And so if we do have other people that are using those grouped records, that would be something else that we could do in batch as well. I don't know if it'll prevent it from showing up in a keyword search, but it will prevent it from merging on an ISBN in a batch upload kind of situation. So that's another option. That's something else we'd also be able to do a little bit more in bulk.
Maybe they will show up on a keyword search.
On a keyword search, yeah. That's what I was thinking, is keyword's everything.
Yeah, so I can, as long as I like scan my ISBN and on a keyword search, it will show up with the having the ISBN suppressed.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would agree with Keen that a best practice would be if you're using, even if you're not using monograph parts, even if you're just using volume names, if you have a record that you are using as a serial record, then changing the type will help you with searching with other people who are doing it differently with searching as well. Yeah, definitely, Ian. That would be a list of TCNs would be ideal. And then we can just have the 020s $A change to 020 $Z.
Any other questions or anything about that, or? I think basically we're almost out of time for our hour, which I'm glad it all fit in, especially with all the technical difficulties that I had, because I didn't schedule for those, but and so any questions or comments or anything, and also if you have questions, you can email me directly, or you can also email the listserv. I will send out some extra info about the meeting today and the minutes and everything. But yeah, if there's anything that, you know, you want clarification on or anything, please feel free to contact me or your fellow cataloger, and we will help you out. So our next meeting would be in September. I'm not going to plan it yet. It's a long time. I've like need to recover from this one and like get my technical mojo back. So, does anybody else have anything else? We adjourn. The meeting was recorded, Jonathan. At least I attempted to record it. Let's hope that it actually worked.
It looks like it is, so.
Excellent. And all the comments here. Okay, if we don't have anything else, I guess I'll adjourn the meeting, and thanks everyone for coming. And I apologize again about my technical problems. Hopefully it wasn't too painful. And we will schedule the next meeting for sometime in September. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye. Oh my gosh, it was terrible.
Apologize like 30 times.
Danielle, can you stop the recording? Thank you, Danielle. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help.